Good afternoon. Welcome to Virtual Admissions 101. I am Jessica Filion. I'm an Associate Director of Alumni Relations at Trinity College. The Trinity College Office of Alumni Relations is so thrilled to partner with the Office of Admissions to offer this, to invite members of the Trinity community with high school students to join us at an insider look at the college admissions process. So I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists today. We have Terry Cowdrey, who is the Interim Dean of Admissions at Trinity. She comes to us with over 30 years of experience in enrollment, including 17 years as the Vice President and Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at St. Lawrence University and Colby College. For the past 8 years, she has worked as a self-employed enrollment management consultant, assisting colleges and universities in making their admissions and financial aid operations more efficient and effective. Terry is here to speak a bit about the college admissions process and to answer some of your questions. Helping us facilitate the Q&A with Terry is current Trinity College senior Amelia Huba. Amelia is studying international studies and engineering with a minor in German. She works in the Office of Admissions and in the Career and Life Design Center and is currently completing internships with the Liana Leadership Foundation and the Small Planet Institute. She also serves as a coordinator for the senior class committee, as well as for several clubs. One of the things she loves most about Trinity is the ability to pursue as many of her passions as possible. Without further ado, I turn it over to Terry and Amelia.
Terrific. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with students and parents today. One of the things that happens in college admissions every year is that we are, as we're reviewing applications, we sometimes think if only the students had gotten some advice along the way, perhaps they would have been able to present a stronger application. And so I hope that some of the information that we share today will help you students feel empowered as you go through this process and feel like you're able to put your best foot forward as you both search for colleges and then ultimately apply to college. I'm going to see if I can make my my screen advance, which is going to be my next challenge. There we go. So I believe through many years of admissions that there's room for humor in this process. And I think that it's something where if you can, as a family, keep your sense of humor as you're going through the process, I think that everyone ends up feeling a lot better about things. And certainly one of the things I think that students like to do as they think about college is to think about becoming more independent from their parents. At the same time, I think that there are some students who will decide that a critical choice for them will be staying within a certain distance from home. Additionally, for both parents and students, the cost of college is a critically important factor. So one of the things I really wanted to spend a few minutes on, and some of the questions you submitted speak to this, which is the effects of the pandemic on the college search process. How has the process changed? How have students changed? And what hasn't changed in the past couple of years, with the goal toward optimizing your own search. So to talk about that a little bit, the process changed in a number of ways, where many colleges prior to the pandemic had chosen to be test optional, and Trinity is one of those. That was a policy change we made that didn't have anything to do with the availability of test dates. What we saw once March 2020 hit is that many other colleges were kind of forced to become test optional because test dates were canceled across the country and around the world. And so all of the NESCAC schools, which is the conference that Trinity belongs to, all of the Ivy League schools, which none of which had been test optional prior to the pandemic, all of them became test optional for the students who were enrolling in fall 2021 and for the students enrolling in in most cases for fall 2022. And so the question becomes, will this policy remain? Is that something for those of you who are currently in 9th through 11th grade, will the test optional policy stay in place? Some colleges have already announced that it will be in place. I believe Penn, the University of Pennsylvania, was the first of the Ivies to announce that they would still be test optional for students applying for fall 2023. Some other colleges have already announced that they will no longer be test optional for fall 2023. So that's going to be something that you want to pay good attention to, particularly if you're someone who feels that the rest of your academic record beyond your test scores is a better representation of your academic potential to be successful in college. There's also a new term, a relatively new term that has come up, which is test blind. And test blind colleges are ones where, or test blind admissions processes are ones where the test scores are never considered. Whether the student chooses to submit them, it's still not going to be a factor. And more colleges are moving in that direction. And I think the reason that that's happening is that at places like Trinity, where we are test optional, we had 89% of our students choose not to submit test scores this year. So when you only have 11% of students submitting their test scores, it can seem like a factor that should no longer be considered. Again, though, that's something that's very much individual school to school. So in the absence of standardized test scores, what is being evaluated? And I know there were some questions about course selection that had been submitted. And what I would say here is that really what we're spending our time evaluating in the application review process is the student's academic record. And an academic record includes where the student went to school, what courses are available at that school, and what courses did the student take, what grades did the student earn, what is the trend of the grades from 9th grade through the middle of 12th grade. If a student has changed high schools during their high school career, we look at those sorts of things as well and try to make assessments for that transition. Some students will spend more than 4 years in high school. Often a student who's at their local school, if they choose then to go away to a boarding school, might repeat a grade when they do that, or might take a postgraduate year. Whatever the overall academic record is looked at very carefully. Now, that was done, of course, when we had test scores as well. But I think that we've drilled down a bit where we are looking again very carefully at the trend of grades and the challenge that a student has sought during high school. A second piece that's really important in considering an academic record is the recommendations that students submit that are academic in nature. And certainly there are some colleges that require multiple recommendations as part of their application process, and often those are from teachers. And so we really are able to get a sense of a student's academic ability and potential through those letters of recommendation. Another important part of the process that has changed is really around in-person programming and virtual programming. So certainly we believe as admissions people that the very best interactions that students can have as they're considering colleges to apply to are in-person interactions, and ideally on campus in-person interactions. Coming for a campus tour, attending an information session. At some colleges, you have the opportunity to hear a panel presentation or to sit in on a class. Some colleges provide the opportunity, at least pre-pandemic, for students to stay overnight in a residence hall. So certainly we think that in-person evaluation of a campus is going to serve you best. At the same time, during the pandemic, we really all had to cut back on our in-person programming. And so replaced it with quite a number of virtual events, not unlike today's event. But the virtual events have had taken many different shapes, everything from mock classes being taught virtually to virtual campus tours. We do our interviews now through a remote connection. So there are lots of different things that we've been able to do with virtual programming. And I think that one of the things that I recommend you consider as you are searching for colleges is do some of the virtual evaluation first. Spend some time just on the college's websites of schools that you may be considering. That's something that certainly students have done now for quite a number of years, checking things out to see what's available and to try to get a sense of the culture of the school through what's available on the website. But beyond the website, then take advantage of some of the virtual events. The beauty of that, of course, is that it is often convenient to do. It doesn't involve an expense on your part, though certainly it does involve your time. But I think it's important that you are able to take advantage of some of those things. And then you might be able to narrow the colleges you're interested in going and visiting in person, or interacting with college representatives at in-person college fairs or at the high schools if you have college representatives who are visiting your school. The other really important piece of this that I will talk a little bit more about in a moment, but when colleges are making their admissions decisions, at many schools, one of the things that is considered once we say, okay, all of these particular students are academically well suited for our campus, but there are too many of them for us to admit all of them, we will look at what kind of engagement the student has had with our school. So we will look and see what events have they attended? Have they come for a campus visit? Now, we don't necessarily expect somebody who lives across the country to have visited campus in person, but we absolutely do expect somebody who lives in Simsbury to have visited Trinity. And so that's going to be true at campuses all across the nation. So there's that notion of not only is it helpful for you to learn, but it's also something that's important in terms of the college understanding the seriousness of your interest in them. Students have also changed over the last 4 years. Much of that has not been because they wanted to, but because they had some limited opportunities, particularly with extracurricular activities. Both those at school and community activities were certainly limited. Summer opportunities, whether it was a volunteer program or a trip that a student was going to take, an enrichment trip, and certainly part-time jobs. All of those were limited over the last couple of years. For students who had been thinking about taking a gap year, a year between high school and college to do something of interest to them, certainly those programs were really reduced considerably. Some schools changed their grading policies. Most of that was in the spring semester of 2020, when some schools went to pass-fail rather than a traditional grading system. And as I mentioned before, standardized testing dates were not offered. We also have found that lots of students have really varied access to technology. Some had very dependable, consistent access, and others were in a situation where it wasn't as dependable. And so all of these things are things we understand and are really trying to consider as we evaluate students. And interestingly, with the exception of the last bullet about the inconsistent access, in most cases, students across the country were all in the same boat in this situation. And I think it's going to be important for you as students who might not have gotten to do things in 9th and 10th grade that you would have done had we not had the pandemic, to really be thinking about how you're going to be involved for the rest of your high school career. If you're in 11th grade now, what you're doing this spring, what you're going to do next summer, and then your senior year. For those of you who are earlier in high school, you have more time I'm optimistically saying post-pandemic, to really, again, re-engage or to engage in new activities that are new to you, perhaps things that you haven't had the chance to do in the past, but that are of interest to you. So it's going to be important, I think, for you to be making sure that if you're out of the habit of being engaged in a variety of activities, that you think again about what is it that you might like to do, how might you spend your time. And some colleges will not really care a lot about what it is you do beyond the classroom. Other colleges, particularly small residential colleges, very much care, because we take a lot of pride in all of the different activities that are available, for example, at Trinity. And so we want to be enrolling students who are going to be interested in being involved in those things. And so demonstrating that you are a person who has those kinds of interests can be an important part of the college application process. A few things that haven't changed. We still have more students applying to more colleges. The Common Application, which if you're not familiar with the Common App, I encourage you to check their website out, commonapplication.org, or maybe it's commonapp.org. But they've reported that more students are applying to college, which is a great thing for us as a country and as a world, but that also students are applying, each of them, to more schools. And so that's something that has ratcheted up the competition at certain colleges, and is another reason why it's important for you to demonstrate engagement at the colleges you're most interested in. It's always important to remember that selectivity, the percentage of applications or applicants who are admitted to a particular college, is a function of popularity, not of quality. I use the example of a number of years ago, I worked at Vanderbilt University, and the School of Engineering at Vanderbilt actually admitted a higher percentage of its applicants than the College of Arts and Science admitted. But the academic credentials of the students applying to engineering were actually higher than those applying to arts and science. But it was about its popularity, with arts and science drawing more students than the School of Engineering did. That can be true for a school in Boston that's very, very popular, and a school in Grinnell, Iowa, which may not be as popular, but the schools can be equally rigorous and have equal quality of experience. So that's something to keep in mind. Always at every college, academic performance, academic potential is the primary focus. All of the other parts of the application are going to be important, but if a student is not academically prepared to be successful at that college, the student is not going to be admitted. So that's been true for many, many years, and I imagine will continue to be true for years to come. And then I've mentioned the demonstrated engagement, and again, that can be essential. A couple of things just to mention, colleges in the Northeast and the Midwest are both recruiting much more broadly geographically in the US, as well as recruiting around the world. That's because there are fewer students graduating from high schools in the Northeast and the Midwest. And so that's something that depending on where you live, is important for you to know. Another thing that's important, at hyper-selective colleges, the general admit rate can be misleading. So I'll use the example. There are 16 colleges and universities in this country that admit fewer than 10% of their students, of the applicants. That's 16. But even those schools, if a school has, for example, a 7% admit rate, they are admitting certain students because of certain reasons. Certain students who maybe are recruited athletes, or certain students who have another kind of connection to the college, or whether it's a legacy connection or another kind. Students who are incredibly talented musicians and they're looking for students to fill their orchestra. And so the student who doesn't have one of those kind of special category situations actually isn't going to be admitted at a 7% rate. They're going to be admitted at even a lower percentage rate. So it's just really important to never look at an admit rate and assume that that means you have that particular chance of being admitted. At the same time, it bears mentioning right now that the average admit rate at four-year colleges in the United States is 66%. Okay, so 2 out of 3 students are admitted on average at four-year colleges across this country. At Trinity, we admit just over 1/3 of the students who apply. So again, though we are certainly more selective than the average college, we are not in a situation where we're admitting, 1 out of 10. And we're glad of that. We'd rather have some students who are eliminating us as an application choice at the front end so that we can really be sending out quite a number of offers of admission each year. The other thing I'll mention is about costs. Many colleges are discounting what is their advertised price by offering merit scholarships or some kind of grant to nearly all the students who apply. And so you should never look at the published price and assume that that's what your family is going to be paying. At the same time, the more popular the college is, the less they need to offer those kinds of discounts. And so you might find as a student that you apply to 5 schools and you might be admitted to all 5 and all 5 have a similar published price. But 3 of the 5 offer you a significant discount because those are schools typically where there aren't as many students vying for a space at that particular college. 2 might not offer you a discount. It doesn't mean they love you any less, but it means that that's just not something they need to do to enroll the kind of class they're looking for. And then the last thing I would say about trends is that most colleges are need aware in making their admissions decisions. Not all colleges. Some colleges are need blind and will make their admissions decisions regardless of a family's ability to pay the cost of attendance. At many of the places that are need blind, they do not commit to meeting the full need of a student. So they may admit the student, but they may provide a financial aid award that is less than what the family feels they need. The colleges that are need aware, in many cases, are in fact meeting the full need of each of the students who are admitted. So at Trinity, for example, we are using a need aware policy, but we meet the full calculated financial need of all of the students who we admit. A couple of things to say before we go to questions. You want to optimize your search by first self-evaluating and then researching colleges. And parents, you definitely have a role here, but there are some do's and don'ts. So this again shows a little bit of humor, but what really I'm trying to say is that for every student, there are going to be things that matter to them that may be different from those classmates that they sit next to in English class. For some students, it's going to be important how far away from home they are. For other students, it's going to be critically important that they can continue volunteer work that they've done in high school. For a third student, it might be most important that there's good preparation to apply to medical school. So you have to figure out what's important to you first, and then figure out which colleges offer that. So when you're researching colleges, there is an enormous amount that you can do online. There are a couple of websites. bigfuture.com is a college board website where you can put in different things that are important to you, and it will provide you the names of some colleges to research further. Niche, N-I-C-H-E, is another web search opportunity to look at colleges. But it isn't important for this to be something that starts prior to high school. For the parents, one of the ways in which you can be really helpful is by asking your sons and daughters questions about what things might be important to them. What are some of their must-haves in a college experience, and what are some of the things that would be nice but aren't necessarily essential? You can help them with some of that online research. Absolutely, that can be a role for parents. But it is important when you are visiting campuses that the student take the lead in asking the questions. When you're applying, you want to take control where you can, which is really about choosing your courses wisely, seeking challenge in the areas that you are most confident in, working hard to earn the grades that will open doors for you. You want to, as I said before, think about how you spend your time out of class. You want to take care with your college essay. You want to avoid certain topics. I always say don't write about love. Dating is never a good college essay topic, and you'd be surprised the number of people who will choose to write that. I think the other thing to think about when you think about a topic to avoid, it's less about a topic, but it's more about not writing an essay that a number of people could write. So the student who writes about going on their class trip to France, it's great if they talk about their reactions to what they experienced, but don't give us a travelogue that anyone else who'd been on that trip could provide as well. Again, you're going to have control over which schools you apply to, and you have control over the effort you put into this, the engagement that you take with colleges, and the attitude that you bring to this process. Again, writing about community service is good, but perhaps not leaving out the part about the court-ordered community service. Again, I mentioned that parents should take a secondary role during the campus visit, and that's true as well, certainly when students are interviewing. We all have our own priorities when we evaluate applications. I talked before about what we focus on. We also consider character. We really, again, at residential campuses, care a lot about the character that students are going to bring to our campus. I always feel like there are two audiences that I'm serving when I'm in a Dean of Admissions role. The first is the faculty, making sure that we enroll students who are well prepared and enthusiastic about taking advantage of the academic experience. And the second audience is really the current students. We have an obligation to bring in a new class of students who are going to both respect the culture of the campus, but also contribute in a positive way. And so that's why we're considering both academic and personal information. In the end, I think the most important thing for all of you to keep in mind, but particularly for the students, that college is a match to be made, not a prize to be won. And where you go to college matters far less than what you do when you get there. And so you really need to be thinking that it's kind of like for the adults listening, or those of you who have had multiple jobs, it's not enough to want to get the job, you want to have the job. The same thing is true for students in the college process. It's not enough to want to get into a particular college, you want to actually be a student at that particular college. And that's what you should be thinking about as you're kind of going through this process. I'm going to stop there, and I've left just a few minutes for questions, but I know Amelia has a couple of questions that have been submitted ahead, so I'll turn it over to her.
Yes, I do. So our first question is, and thank you for the wonderful presentation, Terry. May two leaders of an organization in which a student is active co-write a letter of recommendation to address their various skills?
So that's a great question, and I'll broaden it even a little bit to say it is perfectly appropriate for you to ask for a letter of recommendation for your admissions application from a leader of an organization, or in this case, the co-leaders of an organization that's been really important to you. It's especially good if they know you in a way that is different from the way that your teachers know you or your school counselor, because then it can be provide additive information and may help us be able to picture how you'll be involved in similar kinds of organizations once you're in college. So that's certainly something that is fine to submit because it's adding new and different information to your application.
Great. This is a two-parter. Are there any high school classes recommended for admissions? And how many AP classes does the average student admitted take in high school?
Certainly the most important thing, I think, at a liberal arts campus is for students to have taken a kind of core curriculum in high school that includes English, social studies, mathematics, science, and world language. All of those are the kinds of courses that will prepare you for the courses that you will take at a liberal arts college. And certainly if you have the opportunity to take additional courses, for example, in the arts, that's always an additional plus. But it's key that you stay with that core throughout your 4 years. And if you're somebody who maybe you finish the language opportunities in the language of your choice in 11th grade, then maybe in senior year, you double up on social studies if there are additional courses there that are of interest to you. Or perhaps there are electives in English that you can take in addition to your senior English. In terms of the students who are applying in the number of APs, it really depends on the individual schools that students attend, because certain schools offer AP, others offer the International Baccalaureate or IB curriculum. Some don't offer either of those, but might have dual enrollment with community colleges. And so my advice is always that you should take the more rigorous courses in any area where you have strong interest and you've been successful. So if you've been an A student in every year in math and you have the chance to take AP statistics or AP calculus, you definitely should do that. But if you're somebody who's working really hard to pull a B- in math, no one's going to be expecting you to have taken on AP Calc. But you maybe are somebody who would be taking AP Spanish, or you might be taking AP Biology. Again, depending on what's available, we always look at and evaluate a transcript in the context of what's available at the school. And so there really isn't a good way to say what's an average, but I would say that probably for a place like Trinity, you would be somebody who has taken, to be competitive, probably you'd be taking the kind of in the top 10% of the rigor at your school, right? So that you would be, if somebody was looking at all the students in your senior class and looking at their curricula, you would be somebody who has taken a more rigorous curriculum than the majority of your classmates.
Got it. This next question asks, how are majors considered in the admissions process?
So this is really important because it varies at different schools. For example, at Trinity, the major, you are not applying to a major. You're applying to Trinity and you will declare your major later. That is pretty typical of liberal arts colleges, but there are some liberal arts colleges where you are asked to choose a major or to specifically choose undeclared coming in, but you have at least the option of declaring a major at the time you're offered admission. At larger comprehensive universities, students are typically admitted to what is referred to as a school within the university or college within the university. I used the example of Vanderbilt earlier, and I'll go back to that and say at Vanderbilt, there were 4 different undergraduate schools: the College of Arts and Science, the School of Engineering, the College of Education and Human Development, and the School of Music. Students had to apply to one of those schools, and in the College of Education and the School of Music, you had to apply to a specific major within that school. A closer example would be the University of New Hampshire, where I worked early in my career, where at the School of Engineering at UNH, you apply to a specific major. And they have a certain number of spots for electrical engineering, a certain number of spots for mechanical engineering. And so you're competing with those students who are also applying to that major. So that's really important for you to look at the different colleges where you're applying. And it also is important to make sure you understand what that college's policy is about changing your mind down the road. Because at many colleges, that's a really seamless and easy process. At other colleges, not so much. And you have to have a certain GPA, for example, to transfer into another major. So that's something definitely to consider.
Great. And it looks like the last question we'll have time for is if you could just touch on sports recruitment and how that kind of works.
So athletic recruitment is, again, much more complicated than it might have been 30 years ago. So the parents who are on the call, if you went to college and you were a student athlete, things have changed very, very much through the years. And particularly, I think the changes have affected Division III, which of course Trinity is and the NESCAC Athletic Conference is. Whereas with the higher level divisions, particularly Division I, where students are being recruited and often provided athletic scholarship. And that's been the case for many years. At Division III, it used to be the case that lots of students would come to college and then decide to compete on a team. And that's really no longer very common. It happens, but it's not common. And so if you are someone who, for example, is interested in playing varsity soccer at a Division III school, it's really important that you are reaching out to the soccer coach at the colleges you're interested in and talking with them about the possibility of you playing. They may want to talk with your current high school or club coach. They may want to see film of you playing. Certainly with some sports like track or swimming, it can be or golf, it can be much easier because you have times and distances and objectively evaluated scores. But with sports like soccer or lacrosse, field hockey, basketball, it is often the case that there will be interest in seeing at least a video of your competition. So it's really important, again, that you reach out to the coaches and that you're able to find out that it may be that you are interested in 4 colleges. They're all similar in their level of athletic competition, but perhaps one college has quite a number of seniors graduating that next year, and so has more space for new students to join the team. And another college might have very few seniors and have less space. So when coaches give you feedback, it's really important to believe them, right? And to understand that, again, it's often for them about the numbers. Sometimes it's about positions, but you have to decide how important that's going to be in your ultimate college choice. Some varsity athletes in high school end up being really happy to compete in intramurals or club sports at the collegiate level, and that fulfills kind of their athletic desires. Others, it's really important to them that they are competing at the varsity level. So that's a good one for you to look into.
Oh, right.
I think that we've come, as Amelia said, we've come to the end of our time for questions, and you have a break coming up for a few minutes. But what you'll find is that you should have been sent specific login information for the next portion. It was emailed to everyone who registered for the event. And I think perhaps it's being posted in the chat here as well, if that's something that Jess can do. What will happen is the break, as I said, will be from 1:45 to 2. And then there will be current students who during that break who are available in the meeting room. So they're there to answer additional questions you might have about Trinity. And then the case study exercise, the opportunity to review admissions applications, will begin at 2 o'clock. So if there are questions that anyone has about accessing that information, certainly I would encourage you to reach out through the chat function here. And we hope that we'll be able to get you kind of set up in the way that will be helpful for you. I would also just mention that if there are questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. You can reach me through, I have a Trinity email address, which is easily found. I also have a personal email address that I'll make sure is available through the information that's sent as a follow-up to those of you who participated. I'm happy to try to answer questions again afterward if you have things that are specific. So again, Jessica did say she put her email address in the chat so that if you have any difficulty logging into the next section, please just connect with her. Thanks, Amelia, very much for helping out today.
Absolutely, I'm glad I was able to be here.
Thank you both.